Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed. Chapters 31 and 32. Read for you by Mrs. Shoemaker. Nasreen Baji shut the phone and sighed. She was sitting in the sunken living room next to Jawad Sahib as I handed her a cup of chai. The television was on low in the background. "What's the matter?" Jawad Sahib asked. "Zeba cancelled our shopping trip to Lahore again." "You probably don't want to go anyway," he said. "Traffic is terrible these days." "I need a new sari for your cousin's wedding, and I'm 2 seasons behind with all my clothes. But ever since Zeba's grandchild was born, she has no time." "Go yourself, then." "It's lonely traveling to the city alone. Come with me." She reached out and patted his hand. "We haven't done anything together in so long." "You know how much work I have." She frowned. Then she looked at me. "That's it. Amal, you're coming with me," Nasreen said. "Me?" "It's a long drive. 2 hours if the traffic cooperates. Pack some dried snacks, water, and a thermos with chai." Would Jawad Sahib interject? Tell her I couldn't leave the estate? He clicked on his phone and said nothing. "Going to Lahore?" Nabila asked me when we walked into the kitchen. "Yes, I need to get her snacks and tea in order," I said cautiously. Did she wish she was going instead of me? We'd gotten along fine in the months since our truths, but I couldn't completely forget her treachery. "The bags get really heavy," she said. "By the end, my arms usually felt like they'd fall off. Make sure to put the bags down every chance you get." "Well, thanks for the tip," I said, and she smiled at me. Sitting across from Nasreen Baji in the black town car that afternoon, we drove past cotton fields, orange groves, and sugarcane fields. Soon my neighborhood snapped into view as we turned down the main street, and the same one whose path I'd traveled nearly every week. We passed by the open-air market. Shaukut stood outside, talking to the kulfi vendor. I pressed my fingers against the darkened glass, watching the market slide past me out of sight. "Was that Shaukut?" Nasreen Baji asked. "Yes," I said. For a second I thought it was his father. Things looked quiet there. "It's not delivery day. On Tuesdays and Fridays you can't find a spot to stand." 2 shipments a week? That's impressive. They've added more space in the back. You can't see it from the road. I forgot how it is with our villages. Only those who live there know exactly what is going on. We drove past my street, and then, for a brief moment, my house flitted in and out of view. It looked smaller somehow. I wondered if all my memories of home would grow as distant as Nasreen Baji's had. Watching my village slip away in the rear view, I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. I thought I knew what Lahore would be like, but it was one thing to read about it in a book or see it on television, and another to experience it for myself. Unlike the steady stream of the highway, here rickshaws, motorcycles, trucks, and cars shared the narrow roads alongside bicycles and throngs of people. Stores pressed against other stores on either side of us, large signs in Urdu and in English towering on billboards overhead. Suddenly the car jerked to a stop. "We can't be there yet, can we?" Nasreen Baji asked Ghulam. "Almost. It's another one of those protests blocking traffic." "What's this one about?" She leaned against the car seat and sighed. "Judge Barsi," he said as the car snaked slowly through the snarl of traffic. "That's what the signs say, anyhow." I looked out the window. The sidewalks and streets up ahead were filled with people holding signs. Some had photos of the judge with angry red X's splashed across his face. A woman in a red hijab stood on a crate. She picked up a horn and shouted, "Jail Judge Barsi!" and the crowd chanted along with her, and their voices made the car vibrate. "So a judge does something they don't like, and we pay the price by sitting in traffic?" Nasreen Baji complained. "I swear every week they find something new to get angry about." I'd seen protests on the news, but seeing it in person, I felt the energy in the air, even through the closed and darkened windows, it crackled through me. At last we reached the bazaar. I hopped out of the car and trailed behind Nasreen Baji through the arched entrance into the Anakali Bazaar. The smell of samosas and pakoras filled the air. In my old village there was one stall for all the snack foods. Here, stall after stall was lined up as far as I could see. Men shouted their prices over one another, and their voices echoed through the bazaar. We passed 4 different spice stores, each with turmeric and chilies lining the shelves, and spices in colors and with names I had never seen before. Streams of people brushed past us, and with the loud bargaining, the laughter, the arguing, and the honking of the cars in the distance, everything felt like it was merging into one beating pulse. And the people! Some girls were dressed like me in plain shalwar kamises. Other girls wore pants and blouses. I saw some fully covered with nothing but their eyes revealed, while others wore short-sleeved shirts. All this time I wanted to travel to faraway cities, but here, just a few hours away, was Lahore, another planet. We passed a shoe store, a handbag store, and a shop where rows and rows of bangles lined the walls. I wanted to take a moment and absorb everything, but I had to keep up with Nasreen Baji as she hurried toward the sari shop. Stepping inside, I stood back against the wall. Nasreen Baji sat down on a red-cushioned pillow and pointed to the rows of fabric lining the walls. The shopkeepers pulled off bolts of silk and unfurled them across the floor in front of her. Soon the floor was a sea of green, sky blue, and petal pink. It would take hours for them to put everything back in place, but the men didn't seem to care. Nasreen Baji sifted through the different saris and picked 3. I had never seen anyone shop with the freedom of Nasreen Baji. After the sari shop, she walked into store after store and simply pointed to what she liked: gold earrings, silver-heeled shoes, ruby-encrusted bangles, and just like that, they became hers. The sun was beginning to set when we got into the car. Nabila was right about the heavy bags. My arms strained from the weight of them. The sky flushed pink, then deepened into purple as we drove. It was fully set when we passed our villages. I looked at my school under the glow of the moon, Hafsa's house, my own. "You didn't tell me that Shabnam was getting married," Nasreen Baji said. "Shabnam," I repeated. That was Hafsa's older sister. "Shokut's daughter. This weekend. Borrowed some money for her dowry, even though it'd still be a modest one, given their financial circumstances. Your family never mentioned it?" "I don't have a phone," I told her. "Everyone has a phone. Why didn't you bring one?" "Jawad Sahib took mine when I first arrived." "You mean to tell me you haven't spoken to your family since you came?" I shook my head. "Your poor mother. She must be so worried." Her eyes widened. "That settles it. You deserve to see her. She deserves to see for herself that you're all right. You can have 3 days. Attend the festivities and spend some time with your family." "Would Jawad Sahib let me?" "Why wouldn't he?" she asked. You have time off. It's entitled to you." I'd lived on their estate long enough, but there was still so much I didn't understand. But those thoughts were quickly replaced by thoughts of home. How badly did I miss the familiar curve of my bed, my mother's food, Seema and my little sisters, my friends? I knew I should thank Nasreen Baji, tell her how much this meant to me. But how could I possibly express my gratitude? Words failed. I could go home. However briefly, I could go home. Chapter 32. "Can't you drive faster?" I asked Gollum. "I'm driving no slower and no faster than I ever do," he replied. "But a little faster wouldn't hurt anyone. Please." "You're going to pay the cost to fix this car if something happens to it?" He laughed. "Gollum Baba," I pleaded. "Just this once." He shook his head, but he glanced at me in the rearview mirror and winked. The engine hummed louder, and the scenery passed faster now, and soon my neighborhood sprang into view. Water buffalo roamed the distant fields. A group of boys kicked a faded soccer ball in the street. The car jerked to a stop. Children pointed at it and blocked its path. I pushed the door open. Gollum rolled down his window. "What are you doing?" he asked. "It's just one block over." "I can't wait," I shouted. "Thanks for the ride." And I broke into a run down the road. There it was, the rose bushes. The worn front door creaked when I opened it like always. As I stepped inside, it felt like the past few months had been a terrible nightmare, and now it was over. I was home. Safa and Rabia stood by the couch. They were so engrossed in their argument they didn't see me at first. I took in their flushed cheeks and hands on their hips as their complaints echoed off the concrete walls. Seema peeled a cucumber by the stove. She turned to hush them, and that's when she saw me. She gasped. Her knife clattered to the ground. "Amal!" she shouted. She rushed toward me and wrapped me in a hug. I had forgotten what it was like to feel someone's embrace. "Baji's here!" Rabia and Safa shrieked in unison. Their eyes lit up like a string of lights on Eid. They dashed toward me. I picked them both up and hugged them. I didn't know how I would ever let go. "Amal?" My mother. She carried my little sister Lubna in her arms. Her hair was loose and damp, grayer than it had been 3 months earlier. She walked toward me and stroked my hair as if checking to make sure I was real. Then her expression crumbled. She folded me into her arms. "They said I could come home for a few days," I hugged her, "for the wedding. I can't believe I'm home right now. I called you. Every day the phone rang without answer, and then one day it stopped ringing altogether. Had to wait the longest time before I could get word you were all right." She wiped tears from her eyes. "He took my phone. The first day I've been desperate to talk to you, to all of you." "Seema, get your father," my mother said. "Amal, sit here. Let me get a good look at you." Despite the exhaustion lining her face, she looked like my mother again. "Our dolls missed you," Rabia said, holding out her patchwork doll to me. Safa hurried over with hers as well. They talked over each other, sharing all the adventures I missed. I marveled at Safa's words, the first time I'd heard her speak so clearly. Lubna was a plump baby now, with soft curls like Safa and Rabia's. I held out my hands to pick her up, but she pulled back, studying me shyly from my mother's arms. She had no memories of gripping my hand and looking into my eyes all those hours when she was a newborn. I was not an older sister to her. I was a stranger. "How are you doing there, in that house?" my mother asked. I fidgeted in my seat. I waited so long to come here, to let go of everything weighing on my heart. But the thing was, she looked so happy to see me. After everything I put her through, how could I add more burdens on her back? "Nasreen Baji treats me well," I managed to say. "I'm lucky to work for her." "Good," she exhaled. "I know it's not easy, but I know how strong you are." Strong? What did she mean to be strong? Did I have any other choice? Before I could say anything more on this, the front door opened. My father stepped inside. He walked straight over to me and hugged me, his face wet with tears. With his arms around me for the first time since I came home, I cried. The room grew quiet when I pulled away. I'm sorry. I wiped my eyes. Don't be, my mother said. You are free here. The door opened again. I thought my ears were playing tricks on me. Parveen. I raced over to hug her. Where's Omar? Oh, Amal, she winced. He's at orientation this weekend. Orientation? Yes, for the boarding school, remember? I remembered now. Our conversation by the stream. It felt like a lifetime ago. He starts in the fall, and they wanted the new students to come spend the weekend there to get acquainted. He's going to be so upset he missed your visit. I am so glad things are moving along with that, I told her. And I was. If my own future had to be yanked away, at least Omar could have one. We ate dinner in the courtyard that night. I fixed myself a plate of kardai chicken and the fresh wheat roti my mother had made minutes earlier. I had no idea how badly I missed my mother's food until I took a bite. Hamid was a good cook, but there was nothing in the world that could compare to my mother's food. Did you know I'm learning to read? Rabia told me. Seema's teaching her, my mother nodded. She'll start school in a few weeks. When can I start? Safa frowned. When you can behave. Rabia stuck out her tongue. Seema interceded to cut off the argument. My mother grabbed Safa and put her in her lap. When the conversation turned to the preparations for Hafsa's sister's wedding, everyone started talking at once, and I found it difficult to focus. I felt overwhelmed by the laughter, chatter, and squeals of my sisters, the sounds that I had missed so much. I tried to still myself and soak it all in, to hold on to when I was gone. I used to complain to Omar about my chaotic home. I took any opportunity to escape to the sugarcane fields when the noise became too much. Why did I get so annoyed at the sound of my sister's chatter? Why did I get frustrated with my chores? Why did it take me leaving my ordinary life behind to appreciate how precious it truly was? Okay, girls, my mother said when the last of the rotis vanished from the hot pot. Seema, watch the baby while I get the girls ready for bed. I can do it, I said. Nonsense! You are a guest here for a short while. Relax. Guest? It was just an offhanded remark. They meant it kindly. But to call me a guest in the only place I've ever belonged? The word cut like a jagged stone against my heart.